We've been watching Prime Minister May at Prime Minister Question Time, and she's having a tough time. She's already lost 3 members of her own party today who have essentially crossed the chamber and said we're going to be independent. How important is her political stature in the UK in her negotiations with Jean-Claude Juncker?
Well, after the United Kingdom leaving the European Union, if this finally happens, it's clear that Spain will have to play a more important role together with France and Germany. We are proposing a lot of new ideas in order to make the European Monetary Union working and in order to advance in integration. And I think that we have to stop looking through the back mirror to the Brexit and look into the future, which is the thing that really matters.
Well, one of the things in the future may be a Brexit without an agreement. Are you prepared for that, and how would you handle that?
We still hope that there is going to be an agreement. It's hard to imagine that finally we will go to a situation where we will create damage to each other, especially to the United Kingdom. So I think we will have an agreement. But just in case, we are preparing to face a situation in which we will have to deal with a situation which, for sure, we should try to avoid.
If it is necessary to make some modification in the agreement about the so-called backstop involving Ireland, would you favor making that modification to avoid the damage that you described to both sides?
Well, the European Union negotiators was here yesterday, here in Madrid, talking about the situation of the negotiations, and he once again told us that the treaty, the draft treaty, well, the treaty who was agreed between the British government and the European Union is something that cannot be changed. We can add some explanations, some understandings of what the words means in order to leave some of the question marks that some members of the British Parliament still have. And that's what they are trying to do now, in order to clarify the purpose, the scope of the treaty. But the treaty itself, as far as I know, is not going to be changed.
At the same time, Mr. Minister, one of the things that it's difficult for us outside the process to understand is the backstop, the so-called backstop, was designed to avoid a hard border between Northern Ireland and Ireland. If, in fact, there's a Brexit without an agreement, won't there necessarily be a hard border? Won't that be worse than modifying the backstop agreement?
Well, maybe, but the treaty was agreed with the British government. If they have another idea, they have to come and put that on the table. We are not against the efforts to find a solution, and that's what Mr. Barnier is trying to do in the name of the 27 countries. But if the British side doesn't like it, we wait for another alternative solution. Until now, it hasn't appeared.
So that's sort of the domestic issue in Europe. Foreign, though, it's still the problem of will the U.S. impose auto tariffs on car imports? If we do, by 25%, what are you prepared to do to retaliate, specifically?
Sorry, I haven't understood the question. Can you speak slower and vocalize better, please?
If President Trump winds up putting on tariffs for autos into the U.S., what is Europe willing to do to retaliate?
Well, let's wait. Let's wait to see what Mr. Trump is going to do. Don't ask me which is going to be the retaliation for something that still hasn't happened.
Sure, but you got to have something in your book that's going to tell you this is what we're going to target. You've already targeted things like Jack Daniels, for example, things that are going to specifically impact states with Republican senators. So what's on the list?
Yes, some things must be thought by the responsible of the European trade. You know that in the European Union, external trade is something that has been communitarized. We don't have an external trade policy country by country. And if there is to be an answer, then it will have to be decided and approved by the member states and implemented by the European Union Commissioner on Trade. I don't know which are their plans.
Finally, Mr. Minister, you have elections coming up in your country of Spain. To what extent do developments such as we're seeing in the UK affect the Spanish election in this sense? As I understand it, Catalonia has loomed large in Spanish politics in recent days. Tensions with Catalonia, movements towards separatism even. Does something like Brexit really read against that election? Could it have an influence in what happens in your election?
Yes, for sure. It will have a strong influence. Well, the Catalan problem, the so-called Catalan problem, which is in fact a Spanish problem, which affects the whole structure of the state, it's going to have, and will have, influence on the Spanish politics. And one of the reasons why we are running for elections is because the independency parties in Catalonia refused to approve the budget, even if this was a very good budget for the Catalan region as a whole and for the Spanish society, just because they wanted the Spanish government to recognize the right of autodetermination, which is completely out of the Spanish constitution. And as far as they continue putting on the negotiation table things that they don't fix into the Spanish constitution, they will not have an agreement. So let's see what the Spanish people believe. But I think that today the Spanish political debate is too much polarized. On one side you say you have the right or the far right, which has recently appeared in the political landscape in Spain, claiming that the Spanish government has committed treason because they have been dealing with the separatist movements, which is not true at all. And the other side, the separatist movement, which are requiring things that are against the Constitution, that will not have it. It's going to be a very interesting debate during these next elections, because people will have the opportunity of understanding better which are the position of each one, further than the fake news that has been appearing this time saying that something has happened, which in fact it hasn't happened.